This is the moment Xabi Alonso became champion of England, but 3 years ago, no one believed this was possible. So this is the 3-year story of how Alonso took Chelsea back to the promised land. Alonso stated that it would take time for Chelsea to get back where they knew they could be. As he said in a famous quote, he knew the right quality, systems and conditions to win the title. So he had to discuss with the board what he wanted to do as part of his long-term vision at Chelsea Football Club, as they said that he would be able to set his own transfer targets and objectives for the season, but would have limited funds at the start of his career. So Alonso had to make sure he was building the right relationships at the club, making sure that Chelsea's best players felt comfortable in the system that he wanted to adopt, which would end up being the 3-4-2-1, the famous formation that won Xabi Alonso the Bundesliga title at Leverkusen. But Chelsea still made some low-tier signings, while they sold a lot of players like Neto and Delap that didn't fit the bill, so their total main 3 signings were Senesi, Barco and Siddiqui. But it was a difficult start for Alonso's Chelsea after losing to Manchester United on the first game of the season, before losing 4-2 against Sunderland on match day 2, thanks to a beautiful goal from Isidore. So Alonso was already under some massive pressure, as Chelsea fans were not happy with their current performances, and things went from bad to worse after Enzo Fernandez was still unlikely to play for Chelsea this season and was already looking for a way out of the club, after Real Madrid failed to make a bid for him in the summer due to insufficient funds as they went for other players. So back to the drawing board for Tuchel. He realised that his famous Leverkusen formation wasn't going to work, so he switched to a famous compact 4-2-3-1 formation that suited Chelsea's players, such as João Pedro, a versatile striker that was able to drop wide or drop deep and link up with players to help them express themselves in better ways. With João Pedro's form unlocking the best of Cole Palmer, who managed to score multiple different goals in tight positions, unlocking the 2023-2024 version of Cole Palmer, while Chelsea, in a more compact and familiar system, enabled the centre-backs to perform at their highest level. Reece James was in a more familiar system, while Caicedo, with less responsibility, was able to perform at a high and efficient level. And it was no surprise, with Xabi Alonso being an elite manager, the results followed, as he had one of the greatest runs in his entire managerial career, as he made multiple different calculated moves that helped Chelsea progress into a top club, such as replacing Jorgensen from Sanchez, as he made multiple different mistakes that almost cost his team, while creating unity and togetherness in a team that had been fractured across the last decade. As Blue Codes spent over $1 billion within their time and had only created a team that had no ability to work together despite the quality within the squad. And with that all out the way, he had created the right formula for Chelsea to succeed. However, the truth about this run is that Xabi Alonso failed to beat any of the big teams during this time period, just as losing to Tottenham in a cutthroat game, showing that Xabi Alonso still had a long way to go to build up this Chelsea team to win a title. And with this being a thing that Xabi Alonso would fail to get over within his first season at Chelsea, where multiple mistakes within games were costing big points, while the more experienced teams in the league, like Manchester City and Liverpool that had won multiple titles across the last decade, got one over on him. So Xabi Alonso had a lot of work to do to get his team over the line and win more games in order to compete for a title in future seasons. However, there was the emergence of Jamie Gittins, who was scoring multiple important goals to win his team games just before January.
Gittins! Sensational!
So Chelsea were lounging in mid-table, not too far from the relegation zone by the turn of January, so Xabi Alonso was demanding transfers to boost the squad. With Xabi Alonso failing to sign any of his main transfer targets, why he failed to sell any of the dead wood within the team, like Robert Sanchez, while he dropped multiple points within the January window, Xabi Alonso had to make a panic signing really quickly, as Chelsea almost went back to their old ways, spending $55 million on Akliuch on deadline day. However, he had the true promise of being a squad player that could break the lines in order to set up his attackers. So once again, with Alonso having limited resources to work at within Chelsea, he had to go back to the individuals that had already made a presence at Chelsea Football Club and develop them into top players, which allowed them to get the best of Estevao as he scored multiple goals after the January window. He managed to work with the signings that were already made within the summer, such as Valentin Barco, and he managed to create a more free role in order to Cole Palmer to thrive in. So most people didn't realise at the time, but Xabi Alonso had learned from his previous mistakes of being overly tactical, one of the main reasons why he lost his job at Real Madrid. As with Alonso creating a system where all his current players were able to thrive in a familiar system that played to their strengths, it was a recipe for Chelsea to succeed and have a better season than before. As Alonso pushed for a high-end system that relied on quality to get them through games, such as João Pedro scoring more goals than last season, causing Chelsea to go on another run with multiple wins across multiple games, and sooner rather than later they were knocking on the door for the Champions League, as they were not in Europe that season. That season, Xabi Alonso learned from another one of his mistakes, as he was known for liking to play clean football, something that he showed throughout his main playing career. He learned that there was another way to win a game of football. That was by playing with a defensive might against teams that were more better in an attacking way. And with a bit of luck, thanks to lucky goals from Estevao in games against Manchester City and a flying high Nottingham Forest team, Chelsea were on the cusp of Champions League football just on the final day. And with a penalty goal from Cole Palmer on the final day against Liverpool, Chelsea was set for Champions League football, with Cole Palmer himself managing to get an individual record where he almost managed to win the Golden Boot, just being a goal off the eventual winner, Victor Gyökeres. So with a season where most of Chelsea's players showed true development, it was a season where Xabi Alonso showed true glimpses of how he could help Chelsea win the title and take them back to the promised lands of English football. How exactly would the Spanish manager progress in his second season? Well, I guess we'll just have to find out. At the start of the second season, Alonso promised the Chelsea fans that there would be a lot of signings to come, and Chelsea obliged, spending almost £150 million in order to increase the depth in the squad, as that season there would be a large level of injuries that would almost cost Chelsea the Champions League. That season, Chelsea would say bye to a load of defensive players like Senesi and Badiashile, and with that they ended up crashing out in the Champions League round of 16 despite a very promising group stage performance. While the Premier League just didn't go their way, as despite a very tight race they ended up finishing in 4th place, which at Chelsea was an achievement in itself, as they had failed to finish in a stable position consistently in the league for years. However, what was concerning was that Alonso always managed to find a way to lose against the big teams. But for now, the reason why I showed you Chelsea's league results early in this video is because Alonso's true achievement was showing how he could develop young players into true players that Chelsea could rely on, the same strategy I talked about earlier. Whereas the big players like Cole Palmer were stuck in a rut where they couldn't perform when Chelsea needed them. Not to mention Chelsea had many long-term injuries and players that were constantly being missing through injury, meaning that it was up to the young players or the players just brought in to step up and get wins where were needed. Step in Caicedo, who became a fan favourite across the Chelsea fans as he scored multiple big goals in multiple big games, as he showed the ability to finish inside dangerous position, and his decision making on the ball was deadly, although the youngster still had a long way to go to become a top young player in the Premier League, where across the season Caicedo registered 6 goals and 5 assists. Now the next player to rise to promise in Alonso's second season was Emmanuel Omega, as he wanted multiple different striker profiles to meet his demands. Because the thing is, Omega was a tall, 6'5" physical striker that was brilliant on the counter-attack and finishing off chances in the box, which was important as João Pedro was struggling with the physicality and injuries across the season, as Emmanuel Omega rose to promise, registering 9 total goals. Although João Pedro still made sure to chip in when he could, although the main rise to power in his second season was Caicedo, who became a total leader for Chelsea and made sure to chip in on the score sheet, while creating multiple lasting relationships since he'd been there since 2023. Chelsea had a lot of standout players that rose to power in the second season. Trafford's ridiculous saves that won his team the game, and Chelsea's defensive record became even more impressive as each season went on. Devani Quenda's ability to cut inside and score goals for fun. So Xabi Alonso, why did it look like it and Chelsea were playing average, they were building a project that could become deadly in maybe even the next year, as a load of different groups rose to promise, with the main one being the new players that joined during the season or finally got a chance within the team, as they were the players that were struggling to get over the line when it mattered most, playing against the team Arsenal that went on to win the league, or against teams like Liverpool that were strengthening with big players every year. So how would Chelsea respond? Liverpool were the biggest spenders in the transfer window that summer, signing Arno Martinez, one of the most developed right backs in the world, that summer, along with bolstering their defensive line through Vitor Reis and Nicolo Barella, causing Chelsea to respond as they forked out £90 million on Bradley Barcola. But Alonso's main action was returning to the famous 3-4-2-1 formation that made him successful at Leverkusen, but what made him fail in his first season at Chelsea. But he gave the formation a chance, but yet Chelsea struggled at the start of the season, losing 1-0 to Leeds in fantastic fashion, while losing big games against Manchester United. However, this is where Alonso made his first successful decision of the season, as he decided to stick with his system and trusted that the players would get used to it over time. Well, once again, some individual qualities shone through, with Omega and Palmer starting to get Chelsea a much needed draw early in the season against Liverpool. So as time went on, the system was developing once Alonso gave it a chance, as he encouraged less static positioning, where players would move around to create space for the other players, which meant that younger players like Cavani would get more chances on goal, with a 3-0 win against Bournemouth. And the fans recognised that this success was down to defenders being given more responsibility, as the wide centre-backs were responsible for defending the wingers and pushing forward to help the wide wingers attack. Where, because of these results, Alonso was given an early lead in the title race when he wasn't even expected to have the best team going into the season, as Arsenal, Liverpool and City were considered favourites. As Alonso had brought Chelsea to a place they never thought they could go, as he managed to get the players in favour of the system he was adopting, while he brought in the necessary quality to compete, such as Bradley Barcola, who was slowly getting better across the season. But that quality would fail against the big teams, and Chelsea eventually lost their lead. Yet Alonso wasn't concerned, as the board notified him that there was an opportunity to progress in the Champions League, or after beating Marseille on the final day to get through. Yet hopes were high for Alonso, as with multiple of the top teams getting knocked out early in the group stage, leaving the void for multiple low caliber teams to compete, Alonso knew this could be his year, and with them knocking out Union Saint-Gilloise in the round of 16, this would set up one of Alonso's only and main challenges in the Champions League that year, as they will go up against Liverpool in an epic quarter-final. But back to the Premier League, and Alonso's team is flying, as the team are thriving under the new system he has adopted, allowing for some of the youngest players to get some of their best form ever in a Chelsea shirt. Such as Bradley Barcola, who despite not scoring many goals that season, knew when to pick his moment, as he scored against multiple big teams that season, with one example being his dominant performance at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, as he scored a hat-trick and a 5-2 win for Chelsea. One of the best managerial displays for Alonso, as he had struggled in the past against Tottenham, and it proved that his system could get him past teams that Chelsea had struggled against in the past, as he said in a famous quote, "I saw my system at full potential." But what Alonso didn't say, but what everyone knew, was the man that was actually making that happen, and his name will come to be Magnus Akliouche. But what Alonso didn't say, but every fan knew, was the man that was making this system possible. His name will come to be Magnus Akliouche, who got a standing ovation at the Tottenham Hotspur game due to his deadly passes and his ability to exploit space for himself and his teammates. As that season he scored 10 goals and got 14 assists in the 28-29 season, and who was responsible for some of Chelsea's biggest goals that season in another draw against Liverpool in the Premier League. But building upon this was starting to become a common theme for Xabi Alonso's team, as once again he dropped points to the big teams, this time being City at the Etihad Stadium, where a penalty from Haaland and a goal later on, City won that game 2-0 and took advantage in the league table. In a game where Chelsea were thwarted by City's high-end talents such as the Italian Donnarumma, who was going for the Ballon d'Or that season and made a big save to deny Chelsea's momentum, as they dropped points in the title race. Yet even if Chelsea were always dropping points to the big teams, allowing them to take advantage, Chelsea were always still on the cusp of winning the title that season, as was always seen as a four-way race, as the top teams always found a way to drop points where Chelsea were gaining. Which brings me on to Alonso's next strength, his ability to create a strong defence that almost never conceded a goal, as Chelsea went on to have the best defence that season thanks to multiple players such as Colwell putting his body on the line to make sure that no one got through, Caicedo's last-ditch tackles to support the defence, showing how he could be a leader when Colwell was injured, supporting Barker and Siddiqui that played in a higher line, and of course the emergence of John-Paul Van Hecke, who supported the injured Reins James, who was playing less and less that season, with the Dutchman proving to be one of Xabi Alonso's most important players that season, with his ability to win the ball from deep and progress it into midfield, a supporter to Levi Colwell's game. So Alonso has proved himself as a top manager by making a Chelsea team that was more consistent and more defensively sound, which allowed them to get past tough and tension-fueled games against teams that were ready to suffer for a low block. But while Alonso was making a title charge, he couldn't worry about that right now, as he had a tense quarter-final match against Liverpool, where he quickly realised how tense Anfield could be, as the Kop put immense pressure on the Liverpool manager and his team, barely escaped with their lives thanks to an early penalty goal from Cole Palmer. But of course, Alonso managed to find a way to lose to his former club.
Some telling Gakpo where he wanted him to go, and there he went. He's got a chance, he's got a goal! Great moment for Liverpool and Cody Gakpo!
Robertson's fantastic. It ends up being flat. All ends up. You see he's onside. But what can he do from here? That is absolutely fantastic from Cody Gakpo.
So we were all set for a classic quarter-final second leg on April 15th between Chelsea and Liverpool, where Liverpool were the team to strike first with their big money signing from the right-back position was the team to fire them in front at Stamford Bridge. But this is where we started to see the ugly side of football and the ugly side of Liverpool, as they resorted to fouls as they tried to close out the game early, as Kirkes got away with many fouls and failed to get sent off when he really should have, while Caicedo gave away an easy penalty when Isak pretty much dived in the penalty box late to take the game to extra time.
And they're celebrating already, the Newcastle United fans and some of the players. Alexander Isak, big moment, big penalty!
So Chelsea thought they'd been done by a better team, which wouldn't have been the case if it wasn't for one moment.
Marking Palmer again.
Cole Palmer wins an epic, sensational game.
So the Chelsea board for once were right about putting all their resources into the Champions League, as after getting through the tough fight at Anfield, Chelsea got an easy semi-final match against Sporting, as Sporting and Benfica made their way to the semi-finals, where Chelsea proved they had the squad depth to go all the way, with Matson and Esugo finishing off the tie, which allowed Chelsea to rest their main squad for the tough Premier League title race, where Siddiqui famously said they turned doubt into belief, where despite a loss to Newcastle with only 3 games left to go in the season, which allowed Newcastle to enter the late title race for the championship. Yet Siddiqui was right, as Chelsea were still the main competitors for the title, as Liverpool were at the top and Arsenal were pushing by. Why? Because despite everything, people still underestimated how well Xabi knew his team, and he knew when to rest the players for the right reasons so he could go for the Premier League and the Champions League, just in time for the Matchday 37 match against Tottenham, where Bradley Barker was able to put in a fantastic strike to get them through a tough game. So the pressure is on, but Liverpool managed to respond with a beautiful 3-0 win against Newcastle thanks to goals from Kirkes, as Newcastle officially kicked out the title race and now had to make sure they could make the Champions League. So now we move to East London to see if Arsenal can keep the pressure.
Claims Derby Day again!
So the stage was set for an epic finale. Newcastle were out the title race while Arsenal were willing to put pressure, but the main two battlers were Liverpool and Chelsea, if Chelsea had a job to do at Aston Villa, and hope that Liverpool couldn't get a result against Nottingham Forest.
It's the not knowing, it's the knotted stomach, it's that day. The 30th season of the Premier League, the 9th occasion on which its champions are to be established on the final day.
So Aston Villa started off the game playing defensively as Chelsea pushed forward, hoping to get an early goal to try and seal the title, where it was thanks to Martinez making early wonder saves that Chelsea failed to break through, as pressure mounted all over Stamford Bridge. But with Liverpool being held in a deadlock against Forest, who had their own things to fight for, all Chelsea fans could do right now was hope. Because with Chelsea getting more success and possession on the ball, it was only a matter of time before we would get a goal, and sooner rather than later, it would come, as Chelsea would strike in the 18th minute to give Chelsea fans hope that they could bring the title back to Stamford Bridge for the first time since 2017, as he scored a beautiful curler from the right hand side. Classic Esteban, something he'd been doing throughout this whole career mode, in the shadows. And with the floodgates open, as Bradley Barkley scored, as he had done so many times this season, turned up in the big moments and scored a crucial goal or assist for Chelsea that season. Meanwhile, Forest were getting ever so closer to scoring against a lacklustre Liverpool side who just couldn't get going, meaning as it stood, Chelsea were going to be champions. And with the news that Arsenal were already out of the championship after losing 4-1 to Wolves, Chelsea kept pushing, and eventually after a third goal, this happened.
Penalty.
Palmer with Sorry on his back, it's a penalty.
Of course it's a penalty.
Cole Palmer. Oh. Ice cold.
So Alonso had done the job he needed to do at Stamford Bridge, and with the news coming later that Forest had scored to make it 1-0 at the City ground, meaning that Liverpool's title chances were next to none, Chelsea were officially crowned champions. Now, despite the celebrations, Chelsea still had a job to do, Alonso taking them farther than they thought they could go this early in his tenure, and now they had a job to do to come and bring the title home. But Alonso still had immense pressure going into this final, as Barcelona were considered heavy favourites, as always. With Alonso first having to do a press conference to confirm that Levi Colwill was fit to play for the final after missing the last 3 games with injury, but he had to wear ankle taping for the game. Yet, as Joel Hatter put it, Barcelona were considered heavy favourites for the game, as the fans were seen as unbearable, since the final was going to be held at the Camp Nou. Barca had a much better defensive record than Chelsea, who had been very sound that season, and had won multiple trophies such as La Liga. Not to mention injuries from Omega, who got injured in the final game, and Caicedo and Trafford, who got injured during celebrations. So will Chelsea reach the highest feat, or will Barca be partying at home?
So here they come. They're walking past the trophy they can't touch, but if they can get their hands on it later, it will mean absolutely everything. It's a walk they've dreamed of, and a night they will never ever forget. There are no secrets, they know each other inside out, but the stage has never been bigger, and the rewards never greater.
So here we go, the Champions League final, and with the Chelsea squad being controversial, with João Pedro and Felipe Jorgensen being thrown into the squad with limited minutes that season, there'll be a lot of pressure on them to perform that day. While Valentin Barco and Noah Siddiqui were forced to cover the midfield line due to the absence of Moises Caicedo. So here we go. Chelsea made sure to start the game with pace as they immediately went straight at Joe Garcia with chances from Bradley Barcola and brilliant defensive performances to stop Barcelona's high-end talent. Well, until Yamal managed to find a way through that Chelsea defence, his Jorgensen's capabilities were once again given a reason to be doubted. Barcelona took the lead and now they're looking to take control.
Well, they've been taking risks all night.
So the game progressed into Alonso getting his best players on the ball in dangerous positions as Palmer came ever so close to getting the team back into the game, until eventually Chelsea found their way back. So Alonso understood where the game was and he used the famous set-piece tactic in PES to get through. His João Pedro proved his worth to make Chelsea 2-1 up and get them ever so closer to becoming Champions League winners. With most players afterwards attributing this success due to Alonso's intelligence at analysing the game and what needed to happen. Although Barcelona didn't understand the script as they forced their way back into the game to make it a tight classic Champions League final, thanks to the efforts of Marcus Rashford, but Alonso had one more trick up his sleeve as he brought on substitutions once again to change the game, where he would make one substitution that would change Champions League history forever. But for now we saw the best of the Brazilian Brando Biden, who showed his great ability on the ball and ability to progress the ball forward, where he found Kendo in a defining Champions League moment.
Yamal, but he's kept his composure, kept the ball, now he sets off and skips away from... Oh, that's brilliant! That is brilliant! Genius, that's what it is. Genius. What a treat that is. This is why you tune in, this is why we are here.
So Kendo had almost made himself the worst substitution in Champions League history if it wasn't for his ability to get an immediate assist after for João Pedro to get a second of the game and take this game to extra time in a classic Champions League game. So we're officially going to extra time as Barcelona's high-end quality wasn't enough to get past a Chelsea team that was fighting to be where they wanted to be. And that showed as they created the best chances thanks to the brilliant passing range from Magnus Akliouche and the ability for Pedro to finish in tight positions. And then it happened, of what I like to call the miracle in Spain.